a lot of us, myself included, a lot of us struggle with how to walk in a way that's really obedient to God. How do I do that? And I think often enough we're looking for some convenient 3 points in a poem, some little trick. I was at a Christian bookstore some years ago. I don't really go to Christian bookstores much anymore. Maybe I should, but I don't. Why? I've got Amazon. And so, anyway, I was in this bookstore, and I was looking for some commentaries, and they had this section on the Bible that was, I kid you not, it was no bigger than like 3 feet, probably 2 shelves. And these were all the books directly about books from the Bible. And it was a large store. It was much bigger than this space here. And then I went one aisle over, and there were 2 rows on self-help books. We're kind of looking for some formula. We're kind of looking for some easy, here's how it's done kind of thing. When it really isn't that complicated. Now, obviously, some of those books are quite helpful. I'm not trying to throw them all in the trash. But we are maybe turning over the wrong rocks. We're looking in the wrong places. We need to start with something really simple. We need to see, not as a burden, but that when I do God's will, good things happen around me. I see His name glorified. I see lives changed. I see things healed. I see God's kingdom advanced. Now, isn't that what my life ought to be about? So then, doesn't that sustain us? I hope some of you have had the joy of sharing the gospel with somebody and seeing them come to Christ. I hope a lot of you have seen it. A lot of Christians have never seen that. But to those of us who have experienced that, no guilt trip intended, but to those of us who experience it, there is a thrill like maybe nothing I can describe. When you see someone who was dead and blind come to life right before your very eyes, and then you wonder, like, how did they understand the gospel out of that spotted and limping and twitchy, spastic presentation I just gave them? Amazing. And I could tell you stories about how I led somebody to Christ, and the guy told me later, every time the guy would open his mouth, I'd say, well, I'm not religious. Well, I'm not this. Oh, well, I'm like this. And it was just this, and it was like, Dave, shut up. Like, I couldn't imagine how I hadn't really offended this guy. I was going to college with him. I couldn't imagine how I had offended him. And then one day he came to Christ. And I asked him one time, because I'm thinking, I just totally made a fool of myself. And it had gone on for like months. Every time we talk about the Lord, it would just seem like such a belligerent, narrow-minded, And lo and behold, the guy comes to Christ. So I asked him one time, rather sheepishly, how did you come to Jesus? I'm so glad you did, but what made the difference? Because what I said sure hadn't. And he says, it was you. What? You were so sure. You were so sure. And he'd gone to all this other stuff. He'd been involved in another religion his whole life. And he said, but I could never be sure, but you were sure. So it wasn't what I said. Thank God. It wasn't. It was that I believed it. That was it. Not a lot of glory in that. Except for Jesus saving that young man's heart. And he was such a good guy. He was such a nice person. Anyway, glad I didn't chase him off.